The inner silence is self-surrender, and that is living without the sense of ego. Solitude is in the mind of humanity, and silence is ever speaking. It is the perennial flow of language. It is interrupted by speaking, for words obstruct this mute language. Silence is permanent and benefits the whole of humanity. There is consciousness along with the quietness in the mind. This is exactly the state to be aimed at. By silence, eloquence is meant. It is the best language. The thought-free experience of the self is silence. There is a state when words cease and silence prevails. That state, which transcends speech and thought, is silence. That state in which the I thought does not rise even in the least is silence. The experience of silence is alone the real and perfect knowledge. That which is silence. How can silence be explained in words? A vow of silence is but a vow. It may help in meditation to some extent. But what is the use of keeping the mouth shut and letting the mind run riot? The pure state of attention to the self alone is one's own state of silence, which is devoid of any other thing. Silence, which shines alone as consciousness of being, possesses the glory of being the highest and most potent spiritual effort. It is not only the means to liberation, but also that which abides as the very nature of liberation itself. It has matchless magnificence. If you adhere to that path of silence, the means to liberation, there will be no suffering of any kind. The supreme reality that is liberation is experienced only by perfect silence. Indulging in thoughts drives it away. According to the karma that is working itself out during the present life of the individual self, the Supreme makes the individual act until this karma comes to an end. Efforts made will be a failure due to karma, even in spite of obstructions. The karma will bear fruit. Therefore, to remain silent without trying to oppose one's karma is best. Silence does not mean negation of activity or stagnant inertness. It is not a mere negation of thoughts, but something more positive than you can imagine. The silence of the self is ever there. As long as you run with the running mind, you cannot have it. It is a supreme peace, immutable like a rock, that supports all your activities, in fact, all movements. It is in this silence that God and the liberated souls are rooted. True realization is to cherish with one's understanding, without any obstruction, the first cause of all that is, that silence which is liberation. The perfect silence in which the ego, the root, has been destroyed, is the true nature, which will never be vanquished. The eminent and powerful state of silence can be reached in the heart only by attaining the self state, the unmoving axis. In the state of silence, one merely abides as I. Apart from this, there is neither thinking nor knowing. Silence will manifest itself when the clarity of self-knowledge, which overflows with the exalted, direct experience, causes the trinities of seer, seeing, seen, and knower, knowing, and known to depart. If the trinities that have risen from silence subside in silence, then bliss will arise. A mind that has experienced the light of silence will not readily accept the conceptual drama consisting of the trinities that appears in the other light. It is the mind that is diminished when there is a feeling of deficiency. In the fullness of silence, there is only consciousness, but no thoughts. That bliss that grows in the field of silence is not attained and experienced in any other field. Those who have seen the light of silence are without any attachment to the world, which is an infatuating snare that rises from the I am the doer idea. But the feeling of remaining young forever is attained in nothing else other than silence, the blossoming of truth. You should know that the supreme state of liberation exists only in a mind that has attained the state of silence, and nowhere else. The concept-free experience of the vast emptiness of silence will rise, putting an end to the delusion of the ego, the deceiving fixation. That direct experience of the self, silence, is the axis of everything. This is the summit, the highest good. Those who have sunk deeply into the ocean of silence and drowned will live on the summit of the supreme mountain, the expanse of consciousness. The pure state exists and shines as unceasing, pure being in the heart. After the other thoughts that rise from oneself and the self-forgetfulness are fully destroyed. Clinging to that pure state, which remains without any attachments, is clinging to divine grace. This alone is one's own state of silence, wherein naught else exists. To know and to merge in this state of silence through the practice of self-inquiry, and to remain always as that, is true mental worship. This you should know. Remaining quiet is what is called wisdom insight. To remain quiet is to resolve the mind in the self. Enthroning the Lord upon the seat of the heart and fixing the whole mind at the feet of the Lord. Worship it as your own self, without a sense of difference, because it is your own true nature. You should know that true worship, performed naturally and without a break, is the fair nature of divine silence. Since the silence of self, which shines through the pure mind, alone turns out to be the gateway to liberation. So even though people proceed along any path which is agreeable to them, that gate alone is the final refuge. Attending unceasingly and with a fully concentrated mind to self, which is the non-dual perfect reality, alone is the pure supreme silence. On the other hand, the mere unthinking laziness of the dull mind is nothing but a defective delusion. Know thus: the glory of the state of silence, in which one has merged and died in the real principle, God, who is the egoless self. By inquiring, "Who am I?" alone is the nature of self-surrender. If we scrutinize what the method is to end forever the movements of the wavering mind or ego, which is like a reflection in wavy water, we will discover that the method is for one to remain silently attending to oneself alone, and not for one to attend to that wavering mind, which will make one slip down from the state of self. If the noise of thoughts rising incessantly within does not subside, the ineffable state of silence will not be revealed. Those whose thoughts have subsided within will not leave the strong and perfect state of silence, even in a big battlefield. Keep your mind still. That is enough. You will get spiritual help sitting here if you keep yourself still. The aim of all practices is to give up all practices. When the mind becomes still, the power of the self will be experienced. The waves of the self are pervading everywhere. If the mind is in peace, one begins to experience them.